Zeena and I's text was called The Silence of the Bees, and this is our paper one verbal analysis.
As a general overview, this article focuses on the decline in in bee populations, specifically in West America, in the American West. However, it also touches on a specific beekeeper and his relation to bees, as well as his family's work in the beekeeping industry, called Miller, who we refer to multiple times throughout the text. So the text type is an article written by Hannah Nordhaus, published on a website called High Country News in 2007. The audience is Americans from the West Coast, most likely middle-aged or older. Right under the website title, um, there's a subheading that is the important issues and stories that define the American West, which suggests that these are people from the West Coast in the US. Proud American is generally the character type that this article might attract enough to actually want to read an article specifically pertaining to only American news. Um, Perhaps also specifically interested in import-export details of different states because this article specifically touches on the import and export details of beekeeping, but also it seems to be a theme throughout the entire article. The audience may also be stretched to environmental activists in California, as beekeeping, the effect of bees on the environment and natural habitats is an important part of activism against climate change, global warming, all of that stuff, everything that environmental activists are are fighting against. The context is 2007 California wildfires shook many to the core. As a result, there was a media sweep up and general public interest in environmental issues, specifically to do with global warming. This article doesn't specifically address global warming or general environmental issues, but beekeeping does have an effect on the environment and the way in which natural habitats continue to work and go through the cycle every day. And this article falls within the scope of natural habitat and environment. We have divided the purpose into two purposes. The primary, which is the more explicit purpose, is to educate readers on the shocking drop of bee populations in California. The secondary and more implicit purpose is to evoke emotion and empathy of the readers towards the situation of the beekeeper.
All right, so in the first paragraph, we wanted to focus mostly on what the author does in order to support the primary purpose that Zena just said. So they do this in multiple different ways. First, they refer to population numbers and statistics regarding the bees and different beekeeping events that have happened recently and in the past throughout the whole text. Some examples you can see here on the slideshow. One of them is even when things are going well, a hive can lose 1,000 bees per day. In a matter of weeks, Miller lost almost half of his 13,000 hives, which is around 300 million bees. Another example of this within the same paragraph, or really very similar, very close to that, was when the author wrote more than 580,000 acres of almonds flower simultaneous there, and wild pollinators such as bumblebees, beetles, bats, and wasps simply cannot transport enough pollen from tree to tree. So these statistics shed light on the issue and also kind of inform the reader about some important aspects of the industry. Moving on, the author also discusses many agricultural details on the life cycle of bees and the specific land mass of them and how present they are in the actual environment in California. And the author also goes into specific import and export details on beekeeping. So one example here is California's almond trees, which are the state's top export crops, would produce 40 pounds of almonds per acre. And with bees, they can generate 2,400 pounds. And it goes into other examples, go into the specifics of how bees can increase yields of crops and how much acres they would go over and so on and so forth. Finally, the author also dives into the history of migrational beekeeping and when it was established. We explore this a little bit more in the next couple slides through like anecdotes about Miller's families. But one of the biggest chunks of the paragraph talks about how his ancestors and his grandfathers had established the idea of migrational beekeeping and the whole aspect of how he was referred to as the Henry Ford of the apiaries. You can see in the quote here, it's a quite a long quote, um, and it kind of explores how his grandfather or great grandfather figured out if he moved his bees from one spot to a warmer spot during the winter, he could like cut costs and produce more honey, and that kind of birthed the idea of migrational beekeeping. And so all of these different factors or elements of the text provide the audience with a plethora of information regarding bees themselves, which adds to the author's credibility to write on the subject and its significance. And most importantly, it educates the audience on modern beekeeping in the American West, as well as the struggles that come with it relating to the primary purpose that was established in the introduction slide.
In the second body paragraph, we cover literary devices relating to and achieving the secondary purpose. The first literary device is, I mean, not literary device, but rhetorical device would be imagery, creates images of the beauty of the beehives, only to shoot it down through the crushing reality of the falling population. The following two quotes present that. It was February 2005, and the hives should have been singing with activity, plump brown honeybees working doggedly. Instead, they were wandering in drunken circles at the base of the hive doors, wingless, desiccated, sluggish. End quote. That's from lines 2 to 5. Um, the idea behind this is kind of using a lot of descriptive language to create that imagery and allow people to visualize the beauty of what happens when the hives are working naturally in their natural environment at their maximum efficiency versus right now with the falling populations. The second quote that presents this is when it happened, and then the specific section of the quote that we found was quite descriptive was when the almond trees burst into extravagant pink and white bloom, hundreds of beekeepers descend with millions of bees, end quote. And that's lines 8 to 10. The author also states as fact the significance of bees in modern America with this quote: the annual bee migration isn't just a curiosity, it's the glue that holds much of modern agriculture together. She proves this through later stating in the quote, honeybees provide the same service for more than 100 other crops, end quote. That's lines 15 to 19. She states as a fact that bee migration is the glue that holds much of modern agriculture together, thus implying its importance to modern America, import, export, all that kind of stuff. Um, and then she talks about the significance of honeybees, and they provide the same service for over 100 other crops. The second quote would be beekeeping, which permitted the harvest of previously inconceivable amounts of honey, end quote. Those are lines 30 to 32. Again, pointing out the significance of the work that bees do and how important it is that we maintain their population numbers and don't allow them to fall. The third literary device was anecdotes about Miller's family history, establishing that beekeeping has not only been his life's worth, but many lives in his family before him. The author addresses this extensively between lines 24 to 37, basically saying that his Aspian pedigree, which is his involvement in beekeeping, dates back to 1894. He has the same deals with the sons of the people from the same families that his grandfather used to work with, and also addressing that at the end of the quote, saying competes with the same sons of the men his father vied against, end quote. So, yeah. Pathos is the last literary device. Miller's emotional connection to bees, although they harm him, seeks empathy from the reader for his bravery and dedication to the important cause. The important cause, of course, is population drop. This is made very, very clear towards the end of the article. The author switches to saying he spends 300 days a year with his bees and gets stung almost every day. Just the same, he counts bees among his most reliable companions. That's end quote. Those are lines 39 to 41. And then in terms of his bravery and dedication to the important cause, there's a quote towards the end as well saying, "This is going to be the challenge of my life. It occupies much of my problem solving time." Those are lines 50 to 52. All of these devices achieve the writer's secondary purpose, which is to evoke emotion and empathy, to evoke the emotion and empathy of the readers towards the situation of the beekeeper and empathizing with his position in this crisis. Um, yeah.
And so in the final paragraph, we wanted to focus on register and tone, and also kind of zoom out to the overall purpose and the combination of the primary with the secondary purpose. So first, like as you go through the article, you can note that it has a more formal register, which is used to present beekeeping as significant both historically and contemporarily and in modern times. Throughout the whole article, the author uses jargon from the beekeeping industry. So this is word choice from that specific lexical field. And you can see throughout the article, there's like little asterisks around certain terms that may not be commonly known. And at the end, it sort of describes them. So some of these terms that are seen at the end of the article are padrone, aspium, and colossus, which are all relating to that beekeeping industry. Next, the tone that is established throughout the article by the author is nicely balanced between formal and informal. So, the specific information and statistics that we've talked about a lot throughout these past couple slides in the text is later balanced by the anecdotal themes adopted by the end. And then it's also in combination with the emotional undertones of the text, which are finally highlighted at the end by Miller's relationship with the bees. So some examples of the flow of the tone between throughout the whole article is that, so first with relation to the statistics that are used, we all these articles have been mentioned before, but so this quote is more than 580,000 acres of almond flowers simultaneously there, and wild pollinators such as bumblebees, beetles, bats, and wasps simply cannot transport enough pollen from tree to tree. End of quote. Then relating to the anecdote, those lines from lines 24 to 39 about the whole history of his family and how they established their rigorous beekeeping industry. And then finally, at the end, you can see like the emotional undertones of the text when Miller expresses his connection with the bees, and when this is around the same time where he's talking about how he gets stung almost every day with working with them. And he states in the article, it's quoted that he states, "I understand bees, but I don't understand people." So that shows you his connection with the bees and kind of makes the reader empathize with him and sort of form a connection with the passion that he has for this issue and this lifestyle. So all of these different points that I've mentioned on this slide form a connection between the two primary the two purposes that were established. So first, to educate the bees, no, to educate the people on the bees, and second, to evoke empathy from the reader about the problem and to try and raise awareness of the cause.
In conclusion, this verbal paper one has examined tone, register, literary devices, and language used in The Silence of the Bees by Hannah Nordhaus, and analyzed their effect in achieving both of the prescribed purposes. Thank you.
Thank you.